One of my favorite genres in gaming is horror games. Which is funny because as a kid I was afraid of even walking to the bathroom by myself at night, especially after watching horror movies. But I think, growing up, that's exactly what I came to appreciate about the genre, both in gaming and in movies. The thrill that it gives me. Some titles just put me on edge, holding my breath while I try to make it out of whatever twisted situation I was thrown into. But honestly, even without the thrill, I'm still a fan of horror themes, even if what I'm playing/watching isn't necessarily scary. The horror genre tends to involve fascinating subjects like the supernatural, Lovecraftian creatures, and much more, so I just love it. So much so, in fact, that I decided to put together a list of some of my favorite more recent and, for the most part, relatively unknown indie horror games. As always, before we get into it, let me warn you that nothing in any list, ever, is truly a must-play. Tastes vary, and no one game works for everyone. That's why I try to include a variety of styles here, along with some less scary games that are still horror-themed. Hopefully, with this, there should be a thing for everyone. And if you're wondering how I judge something to be a lesser-known title, it's via Steam reviews. Quite a few of these games are under 1,000, so they could use a sales boost. Anyway, without further ado, here we go! Super Lone Survivor is an interesting title. You might know the original version called, Lone Survivor minus the super, which came out over 10 years ago in 2012. Feel old yet? It's one of the more classic indie survival horror games, and let me tell you, it's an awesome game. So much so, in fact, that just at the end of last year on Halloween, the developer released an updated version called Super Lone Survivor. It has achievements, new options, adds quite a few new cool things like 3 new secret endings, 2 new weapon upgrades, new enemy types, new areas, and even 2 new in-depth side quests. That being said though, the developer does recommend not buying the game if you have already played the original and are not a big fan, so, keep that in mind. If you saw this game when it came out in October 2022 and found it too expensive, I have good news. Just on the 24th of January or so, the game received a permanent $5 price cut on all storefronts. And if you're curious about the length, it should run you about 4 to 5 hours for a casual playthrough. If you are new to the game, here's what to expect. You play as the masked, nameless protagonist aiming to escape a city consumed by disease. It's a 2D survival horror game akin to the classics, having you run back and forth with key items to unlock new passageways and advance your story, which is presented in a very abstract but really effective way. Between a basic stealth system relying on indentations in the walls and a gun with limited ammo, you can either avoid or kill the enemies you find. Regardless, the game isn't too hard, especially as this remake gives you 3 difficulty options. The graphics are really charming and the often subtle background sound adds to the unsettling atmosphere. This game was a favorite of mine 10 years ago and honestly, it remains so to this day. It's really fun. Bloodwash is a 1 to 2 hour long experience that involves surviving a late night trip to the laundromat. Yup. You play as Sarah, a pregnant college student who, due to some unfortunate circumstances in life, ends up having to go wash her clothes for an interview. Is there a serial killer targeting pregnant women on the loose? Yup. Is Sarah in a position to skip laundry and go dirty to the interview? Nope. This is a first-person game with crusty PS1 style graphics, and you can even choose a VHS mode to make it extra PS1-y. There isn't much in terms of actual combat or puzzle solving. The game is more about exploring and finding information that way. The story, while basic, is well told and kept me hooked throughout the game's short length. And in case you don't care about exploring and finding information, the game does have some time-wasted items to use while the laundry and dryer both finish, which are needed as each run for about 10 real-life minutes. The comics especially are extremely well done and I love them. Honestly, don't sleep on this title. It might be short, but it's really good, and I urge any horror game fans who are not put off by the PS1 aesthetics to give it a shot.
Jeff? Do I need to get the driver to throw you off?
You're going to die tonight.
What?
You're going to die tonight. I've seen it. Tonight is your last night on Earth.
And speaking of PS1 aesthetics, the third game on this list is one that absolutely nails that style. Murder House is just a delight of a horror game to play, which probably explains why it's one of the more famous on this list. You play the main game as Emma, who's an intern for the News 9 crew. They're shooting a story about a serial killer dressed as an Easter bunny, one that you meet in the game's prologue. To do so, they decide they want to head to the killer's old abandoned house, and obviously, things go wrong when it shows up to kill the entire crew. I mean, who could have imagined that to be a bad idea, huh? Honestly, I need to gush about the aesthetics here. This game nailed not only the PS1 style, but also the 80s slasher movies vibe down to a science. Just look at the scene, just look at it. The best part is that the game provides you with lots of customization options for you to adjust how your game looks to your liking. You can give it, for example, a VHS style, projector style, CRT filters, black and white filter, amongst many other options. And you can even change the camera mode. Dolly has the camera following you in weird angles, think tank control games from back in the day, and FPS has you walking around in first person. I've been trying to showcase all of this during the segment of the video. Heck, every time you open a door, you even get a door transition, like old school survival horrors. It's simply gorgeous. As for the gameplay, this is a survival horror exploration title. You go around collecting key items that allow you to open new paths in the house to eventually, hopefully, come out of the situation with your life. There is voice acting with distortion, which I love, and an incredible atmosphere, made even better by the soundtrack choice. And, you know, I guess if you care about that, Jacksepticeye voiced the character. Mothman 1966 is described by the devs as, quote, a visual novel fusing exceptional writing and stunning illustration, inspired by mid-20th century pulp fiction and 80s home computer graphics. End quote. And honestly, this description is mostly pretty accurate. In that 80s way, the graphics are absolutely gorgeous and very uncommon nowadays, which makes it a refreshing change of pace. As a visual novel, you'll mostly be reading the events that take place and occasionally choosing options that influence your immediate outcome of the situation, though not so much in the grand scheme of things. There are several situations in which you can die if you choose the wrong option, but you instantly reload to the beginning of the encounter that killed you, so it's no big deal. Which is a blessing because sometimes you will find yourself guessing what the right call is. You'll also occasionally have minigames to tackle, including the highly addicting Impossible Solitaire. And no, I'm not addicted, okay? That all aside, the writing is pretty good, the story is interesting, and the soundtrack is pretty awesome. While this didn't take too long to beat, clocking in at around 2 hours, it was a really well spent time. Now, I know this and the next game have both featured in the 10 must-play indie games from 2022 list, self-promotion ahoy, but I really think they're incredibly unique and good enough to deserve to be in this list too. Faith is a game that boasts DOS-style graphics and a retro soundtrack that absolutely work in favor of the game's horror, making all games in the trilogy be very, very unsettling. This is also partly because of the theme, which is very biblical in nature as you play a priest struggling against demons and satanic cultists. Gameplay-wise, this is an adventure game with some puzzles to be completed and spirits to be exorcised, which is your version of collectibles in the game. It doesn't really do anything special in this front, but with such an incredible presentation and way to create horror, it really doesn't need to. The game also, thankfully, doesn't rely on jump scares, instead masterfully building an unsettling and disturbing, horrific atmosphere that leaves you on edge throughout the games. Honestly, Faith is absolutely iconic. I hope the game leaves a great mark on the indie horror scene because we can really use more people like this developer around. If you're curious about the length before you pick up the title, it runs for about 5 to 6 hours. Should also be noted that buying this game gives you the 3 games in the Trinity, not just the last one. Have you ever thought about how hard it is to move your face? Yeah, you heard me right. Just, you know, the mouth muscles and the cheek muscles and the, I don't know, eyebrow muscles. I'm sure there are muscles everywhere, right? Have you thought about how hard it is to move them? If not, rejoice. Whose Lila invites you to consider exactly that. You play the game as a character who does not know how to show emotions naturally, and you must drag their face for them as appropriate according to the situation. This happens via the screen, which is divided in two. The dialogue / whatever is happening, and the speaker's face. When your face is showing and you get a limited time to choose your reply, you can use that time to warp your character's features into whatever you wish to convey emotion-wise. It's very, very nifty and incredibly unique. That aside, the game is a narrative-focused point-and-click, so don't expect any high-octane action gameplay. But do expect lots of endings, well-implemented horror via narrative and themes, an absolutely kick-ass visual style with many palettes you can choose from, and an incredibly nuts storyline that I couldn't wait to see concluded, because I was just that invested. Don't get me wrong, Whose Lila is not a masterpiece by any means, but the brave and unique combination of all these elements, especially the gameplay, absolutely earned it a spot on the list. Next up we have Evil Tonight. Potentially the most good-looking game on this list in my opinion, Evil Tonight is a survival horror game kinda akin to Resident Evil. You play as Sylvia, who's trying to rid the location of evil spirits. She is, by all means, a proper badass, and this is absolutely reflected in the gameplay. You will soon find yourself engaged in the game's basic combat system, within which you can use multiple weapons or a melee move if you'd rather keep your ammo. And depending on the difficulty you're playing, keeping your ammo might not be a bad idea, as it is limited. That aside though, the game is about as basic survival horror as it gets. You have your safe rooms, you have your key puzzles, you have your lots of backtracking throughout the game's academy, to use new items to unlock new rooms in previously explored areas. The list goes on. But while this isn't the most original game, or even a very memorable one unfortunately, it is a game that I had a blast playing, and I sorely missed the action-focused gameplay in the survival horror games of this list so far. The story is also nothing special, though it did keep me guessing for a short while there. Moondown is one of the more unique games in this list, and I urge you to please take a closer look at it, despite what you may think based on your first contact with the title. This is an absolutely gorgeous hand-penciled horror tale set in a dark, secluded valley in the Alps. You play as a protagonist who gets a letter saying his grandfather passed away in a fire. The letter also tells him not to go to Moondown, but does he listen? Hell no. What follows is pretty much any sorts of madness that you can possibly imagine. Decapitated goats, deals with the devil, paintings that suck you in or move at will, and that's just the first 30 to 60 minutes. Seriously, if there is one thing the game will provide you with, it's an interesting storyline. I almost binged the entire thing when I first played it because I just couldn't stop trying to figure out how the heck we're going to deal with the threat that moved the entire storyline. Furthermore, this is all complemented by a sick soundtrack, great visuals, nifty puzzles and systems in place such as drawing your own area map via vantage points. And I particularly love the way it does horror, not relying on jump scares, but rather by using the environment to play with your mind.
Ja, passentau gisa la leunga per inflar. Sil meins aschia sai eu schara viver els.
Can you tell I'm a major fan of Moondown? This is also one of the longer games in this list, clocking in at around 7 hours, so you will have plenty of time with the wonderful world the developers created. Happy's humble burger farm throws you into the shoes of a fast food worker. That's it. That's the whole game. Dealing with pissy customers, rushing to prepare a ton of burgers as an underpaid worker in an understaffed shop. Need I say more? This is like the ultimate horror game. Actual fast food workers that may be watching this, beware, as if you play it, you might just feel like you're working again on your off time. I joke, but only partially. See, you will spend quite a bit of time making burgers, shakes, fries, and other tasty treats for ungrateful customers. Mess up and you have a possessed animatronic come wreck your face. You know, all in a day's work. But that all being said, this is only part of the game, and while I'm not gonna spoil the other part, let me tell you that it is awesome. I'm a sucker for the themes the story explores, and while I can't spoil them, I can show you this part of the release trailer so you can see some glimpses of what waits you. So yeah, this game is really unique with its work and earn money mechanic, and the story goes somewhere I particularly love. But if you need more convincing from the horror aspect, know that this game can be terrifying at times, with some unsettling older graphics and effects. And jump scares. Lots of jump scares. The subtle soundtrack also sets the mood very well. Honestly, this was one of my favorite titles on the list, so if any of what I said seems interesting, I highly recommend checking it out. And if you're wondering about the length, a playthrough should provide you with between 4 and 6 hours of fun. Saving maybe not the best, but certainly the most unique for last, Iron Lung. This might very well be both the most famous and the most unsettling game on this list. You play as a convict sent to explore a moon covered by a blood ocean as a punishment. The problem is your submarine is way too weak to get down to the required depths, so the solution is to weld it shut, windows included, with you inside. Fun, isn't it? And that's how the game progresses. Your entire play area is just your tiny submarine, which you have to move without being able to see where you're going. How do you do that, you might ask? Why, by using a map and some good old coordinates. In fact, your goal is to find and photograph 10 spots in the moon that are in specific coordinates. While this may sound simple enough, moving the submarine is a manual process and the terrain is full of walls that you can hit and can't see. So you have to follow the map carefully and pay attention to your radar as it will beep and show a dot whenever an obstacle is around you. What makes this game so incredibly brilliant is that it uses all its gameplay elements to produce one of the most unsettling atmospheres I've seen in a long time. At this moment, for example, I was just minding my business when my radar beeped super fast, indicating I was about to hit something that showed up out of thin air. But then it vanished. I can only imagine a monster of gargantuan proportions swam past the sub. And the pictures you take? Well, be careful with them as you might just see something you don't want. The game can indeed be monotonous to play as the actual gameplay is just pressing buttons, but this is one of the most unique and unsettling experiences around. I do urge you to give it a try if you think you won't find what you've been seeing boring. It's not too long either, it's just 1 hour long game. And alright, that's it. I hope this video was useful to you and that you managed to find something new to get. If you did enjoy the video, please do leave a like and subscribe as it really helps out the channel's growth. But above all else, leave a comment. Tell me what you think of my selection and what your own favorite indie horror titles are. Plus, I would love feedback on the video itself. That aside, thank you so much for watching and I'll catch you all hopefully in the next video. Bye bye!